So with that, I would suggest that we get to the first keynote. Our first keynoter is Marc Grünewald. He comes from MAN Energy Solutions, where he's a vice president. He is a team leader of business development and is a strategic internal consultant to the company. He has been working, prior to working for MAN, he was working for Accenture and Steag, which is one of the power plant operators in Germany. And as a head of project development at Steag, he developed several large-scale power plants, not only diesel engine power plants. We're not talking about that specifically. In preparation of this forum, I invited him because I think that MAN is uniquely positioned to engage us in the discussion of what are the right components for decentralized power generation and possibly even centralized power generation. And the reason is MAN is the inventor of the diesel engine, as you may know. And they have been doing very well, staying in the business, unlike other inventors who had the fruits of their invention go to other companies. They managed to be in the lead of diesel engine development until today. They also, however, have a very strong presence, as most of you know, in the turbomachinery industry, including power plants. And that makes, I think, our first keynote speaker in this event uniquely positioned to give us insight into the options we will have in the near future, which, according to him, is decentralized.
Thank you. So, good morning to everybody, and ladies and gentlemen, great pleasure to be here, and thanks a lot for that invitation, and I hope I can fulfill a little bit your expectations, and I'm open for discussions, and maybe some of my key findings are interesting for further discussions. The role of large combustion engines in the future of a decentralized power generation, and you've seen, I put on the first slide, let's say, the message which is right now in the world, everybody is thinking about that the future of power is more or less decentralized, but I think we will see later on it's not only decentralized, we will need some kind of large combustion anyway, but I would like to figure out this later on. Allow me, just before we step into the real figures here and what really drives us in the energy market, just a short overview about the MAN organization, because as Professor Solmesen said, we have some changes. The first change is, I think, the formerly known MAN Diesel and Turbo, and as he said, the company where Rudolf Diesel invented the diesel has now a new name. We are now Energy Solutions. That shows a little bit even what's going on in the world. You're not anymore talking about products, you're talking much more about solutions. You have to make much more, let's say, offerings to your clients which are not based on a product, which are based on that they want to give you to help them to find their solution. And we are, as MAN, by 1st of January, not anymore part of the MAN SE. We are now belonging 100% to the VW group, and we are now 100% subsidiary of VW, and people will figure out that we are, as a company, with our strategic business units, which you see here, which is mainly engines and marines, which is the power business, and which is the turbo machinery, as well as a worldwide acting prime serve organization. We are to somehow not typical for the VW group, where they are producing cars and others, but in the world which becomes more and more green, and even the cars becoming more and more green, there are maybe some more synergies which you will see in the future. And one thing which I addressed here on the right side is that for us, we do see a lot of links in the world of tomorrow, even for engines, because there will be a need for green fuel, and there will be a need to look for solutions like liquefaction, like biogases, like power-to-X and things like that, which will help us to reduce CO2 footprints, even if you use engine that could be for e-mobility, that could be for others as well, that will be interesting for ships, for airplanes, and so on. So and there's going to be really a story in the future, and where we believe will be quite interesting. And one step there at the beginning is for sure even the transition to LNG and others, and we are engaging in that. So now let me come to what really is the happening and what had happened, because when you look about how is the future for our industry, and we're talking about what kind of power plants can we sell and what is in the interest of our clients, we have to look what drives today's energy market, secondly, we have to look what has happened. There have been disruptive changes in the merit order and in the energy industry. And I will take the example of Germany, not because I'm very familiar with that, but I think to somehow it shows worldwide what will go on. And then I will focus a little bit on what really is needed to look and how to make money in the future in a decentralized world. So to look what is going on for power solutions today and tomorrow. Number one, it's pretty clear what all of us drives right now is the question of decarbonization. This is a call for new technology. There's everyone knows this limit of global warming to below 2 degrees Celsius, carbon neutrality until 2050. And what this means is the drivers of tomorrow is the question of reducing CO2. It's not anymore the question of economy of scales to somehow. It's not anymore the question of efficiency of a plant. It's really how can you reduce your CO2 footprint? And even if this is in most of the areas today not valued, so we have the problem that we could offer solutions today which you don't get a payment for and won't pay off today. But this is the driver. If you talk to politicians, if you talk to everything, the decarbonization really drives a lot of us and is driving the future. What has happened for us is that the new disruptive energy landscape is on the table. Over decades, the energy business was dominated by large utilities who were supplying electricity to often single buyer markets without focusing on huge competition. And as said, the decisions for investment were driven by economy of scales, by efficiency and things like that. But with a strong success of renewables, the picture changed completely within 1 decade. And wind and PV is now the new baseload, to somehow question mark. But we will see it is extremely important because wind and PV is often CO2, no, it's in general CO2 neutral or CO2 free, and it will become priority number 1 if you have to decide how to get your energy demand organized or backed. So fossil-based power plants must now serve as operating reserve when the wind is not blowing and the sun is not shining. We will talk about storage solutions in the future. We will look about if this is going via batteries, via, let's say, ETS or LAS, or maybe via shifting power to hydrogen or to power to X. But all this will have the result that the engines, as we've seen them in the baseload power plants, will not be anymore in the focus. First of all, people will look for how to get their energy supply safe and secured, managed on a mainly CO2-free basis. So, high share of flexibility and low carbon footprint on the reduced annual fuel hours are the requirements of today's fossil-fired power plants. So, let us step in and understand a little bit the disruptive changes, what really has happened. And I'm taking the Germany as an example. Before the year 2000, we had a peak load in Germany about 80 gigawatt. We had a predictable supply and demand planning according to the availability of the plants. We had only one market, no larger impacts on weather conditions. The TSO inventions were as good as nothing, 10 per year. And the guaranteed capacity was at any time 85 gigawatt. So the former merit order system was based on a market equilibrium of supply and demand with a lower impact of renewable. Typical grid load, approximately 19. And what happened then, it was quite easy. We had the base load with the nuclears. We were able to serve at 2 to 3 cents. We had the lignite plants coming then as additional base loads in there. We had the hard coal for the intermediate. Then we have the gas turbines to somehow even in the same range. And then we have the peaking, peaking plants, mainly oil, diesel, gas, or peaker on gas basis. There were at this time not much solar in the market, not much wind, and there was no really an impact in the market via this renewable, through this renewable. So, and then have a look on the way it worked. There was a requested grid demand, and then the merit order were looking on the marginal costs, and everything was fine. Everybody was able to predict the EX price market. Everything went well, no problem. Then something happened at this time, and you have to read this slide from the right to the left. So I hope this shows from here to there. And in this slide, it shows what happened in Germany and the world. We all were believing we need to invest in around about 40 gigawatt new power plants. Big coal, gas, and so on. We all thought by 2018 we need to have about 40,000 megawatt installed in additional baseload. And there were huge investments. RWE did 12 billion in large coal power plant. E.ON did the same. Everybody was investing in large gas turbines, combustion plants. So we all were driven here looking at the prices for this is base load, this is during the weekend, and this is the night period. And everybody was looking, and here we were all investing. We were looking and building in large power plants. And then when we were building them in that period, mainly, something happened which nobody really expected. The prices didn't went up. The prices stayed. So, hey, and all the intelligent guys which were doing this plannings and thinking about strategic made investments, lots of billions were invested, but the profitability didn't came. So, what happened? Why is that? And what was really the situation? And now it's have to. Okay. Here we have a thing which we really have to look. We have to look what really happened with our installed power. The renewables in Germany at this time, driven by the EEG. This is a German law, and we gave a little of subsidies at any time. And the wind and the solar got their subsidies, and they could invest in this kind of equipment and installations without any risk. But today and this is why I'm showing this, today we have a total different world, and we have another price level even for the renewables. So this is a good learning story. This shows pretty much that at this time the investment in solar and in wind really came up. We had always around 120,000 megawatt installed, and we thought we have to go up with this fossil fuel. And what really happened was the wind and the solar came in, and from, let's say, a position which nobody really recognized as relevant in the market, they became a real relevant player. And at that time, specifically in Germany, this energy came into the market, and we will show this later on, and had a huge impact on that because it totally changed the game. So based on that, we have today, you can't believe that, more than 200,000 gigawatt installed, and we still have the same demand in Germany. So this is why all people say we have enough load. There is no risk for unsecurity, for interruption, and so on. But we will see this is maybe not the only thing you have to look at. But this is the actual installed capacity. So, and like always, and even today, and take that as a note, and we will come back to that later on, the base load is still something which is provided mainly by nuclear and lignite, so by large combustion energies. And we will have a look on that later on in more detail. Now I'm still in the situation of describing what really happened, and lots of you know that a plant like Irsching, which was invested in that time, was one of the most advanced plant with a 60% really efficiency. Siemens did a lot there, E.ON invested a lot. They wanted 2 times to shut it down, but the load manager, the tenant who was driving the grid at that era and said, no, we need it for the grid, so you're not allowed to shut it down. Commercially, it was a disaster, so nothing happened. So what really happened at that time, we had the situation that something went wrong. They were high efficient. People built the most efficient power plant, but out of the market. Out of the market. And that happened to Statkraft in Hürth, that happened to the others as well. So why could this happen, and why could it happen that people like we, brilliant engineers and brilliant managers, we made that investment and we lost hundreds of millions, to be honest. So what happened? Let's understand it, and let's look what really happened there. We're still back to the way how it worked and how it was managed and how the electricity price is created in the German side exchange. The fact is, we have now still around about 80 gigawatt as a peak load. And we now have some new influence factors, like we have to look on the weather forecast, which was not really something which was affecting somebody in the last time. But now you have to look, how is the wind tomorrow, too much sun have we have, because we have now these kind of energy which feeds in, and this feeds in with priority. So, and no matter, now we have the situation that these renewables have at all time priority. They are feeding in the system operator has to manage it, and for the rest of the power plants in the world, this means you only can produce when no wind and no sun is available or whatever. So now things get a change, and the change is quite interesting. We see now that in that market, here in that range, wind and PV steps in. And beside the fact that in Germany, due to the fact that it was subsidized, they were coming in at zero price, so it was just power which came in, and the consequence was your power plant, which was calculated at this way to sell at 3 or 4 cents, and you did your module prices. Now there were 40,000 gigawatts right now coming in and pushing the prices down because they're in for zero. But I'm showing this even because it happens in the world and will happen everywhere in the world, because as of today, you can produce wind and PV everywhere in the world below 6 cents. And when you have a look on some auctions in Mexico and other, they were 2 or 3 cents for wind. So we are talking about power prices based on renewables, which are much below of what you can achieve with a gas turbine or whatever you're looking for, because you have your costs, your fixed costs, and you have your operational costs. Normally, you could not produce, to be honest, below 6 cents as a marginal price. But this is now the fact that everywhere in the world, we will have the situation that this kind of power is coming in and drives the markets. So that has consequences for the way what we need in Zukunft, what we need in the future. So what solutions pays off in the future when we think about the plants we want to build and we have to build. So it's not anymore the coal-fired baseload, and it's not anymore to somehow hear the nuclear ones, because it doesn't look like. So what you need, much more flexible operation models. It's required to be able to start and stop. It's not anymore so much the question of efficiency, because if your plant only runs a few thousand hours, nobody really looks if your efficiency is 48 or 55%, because the fuel price is not really anymore the driver. So there are new things bringing in the key decisions where you have to look at, and you have to look much more on high efficient part loads, starting times, backup load, and so on, and you have to look on the CO2 footprint. So this brings us then to the question, Can we produce in such a market, and do we have a chance in such a market to act with a baseload plant? And my conclusion on that is I just made a simple, let's say here, show for a financial model based on the 2018 prices for a 100 megawatt power plant. We took 5 of our gas engines. Output is about 95, 100 megawatt net. We took the 46% efficiency. We did the gas price at 22 euro. We calculated with an EPC price, as you see, at about 600 euro per kV. We did a typical project financing, 30/70. We brought in construction time of a year. We even included some CO2 costs, starting costs, startup times, and then we calculated what is going to be our generation costs for such a power plant. And if you look at the figures in the middle, you see you need around about the 5,000 hours to cover your costs, which are around about 55 euro per megawatt. So below that, you're still making losses. So, and to be profitable, such a plant in a market should run roughly in that area here, between 7.5 to 8,000 hours. Then you may create a little bit money to be able to create some returns. So this is why I'm stating here, you need this 8,000 hour baseload to be profitable with that kind of baseload equipment. So that is very unlikely to happen. So it's very unlikely to happen. So there are now other, let's say, key components which are drives investments in these kind of power plants. And for the EU market, and I'm talking first about the EU market here at this level and in Germany, so solutions only pay if you have a couple of things. You need high efficient prime mover technology because you need low CapEx, short construction time, lower CO2 emissions. Then absolutely important is the combination of power and heat, the CHP solutions. Normally right now, most of the people we are talking to, the utilities, all the people who are looking for it, they want to look for CHP solutions because there are even some fundings and there's even some money behind that allows you to do that, but it gives you a much more efficiency and brings you, let's say, twice the money you get if you only produce power. And you have to be able to serve as well for the regulation, for the market there. You have to start within 15 minutes and you have to think about serving primary reserve, secondary reserve, things like that. This is for sure always something which you have to consider as well when you think about some new projects. Here is the next slide is a German example. This is EMBW, where we are building a 30 megawatt combined cycle for the district heating as well as the utilization. And it is something which happens often now in the future because they are shutting down their old coal-fired plants even to reduce the CO2 footprints. And then you look for CHP solution, and then these gas engine solutions or others are quite interesting. So, but we are not talking about a 400 or 500 megawatt plant. We are talking in this range about 100 to 250, whatever. And when you look in Germany, all the investments which were made in the last time, Mainz-Wiesbaden, 10 times 10 megawatt. When you look at the other one, which was one in Kiel by Jenbacher, that's even in the range where people looking for gas engines, 5 or 10. So you have flexibility, you can shut them down, you can operate according to the grid. So the chance to go for a gas turbine, which is really effective when you can run it on a base load, is much lower in our system right now. And this is specific, let's say something in Germany, there will be lots of, and in Europe, but there will be even other markets worldwide where there's still a demand for base load and for other one. But here in these markets right now, it's very difficult. So what does this mean? The future is much more decentralized. And take that picture just as an example, that could be even a large city or a city which has to be built up in Africa or whatever, where they do their plannings, all of them thinking about decentralized solutions. Why? Often in most of the emerging countries, the grid is not available and there is no grid. And the question how to manage things becomes much more clearer if you look in a decentralized solution. And this decentralized solution could be a city with a couple of, let's say, 100,000 or million people. Even they will look how they can secure their own energy supply. And if you do that on a broader basis, but then you will figure out that it's quite interesting to look for your own, let's say, supply and to make yourself independent. So we are talking daily about hybrid solution, microgrids, and these kind of offerings. And what happens is, as is shown here on the picture, the people will use as much as they can in wind and in photovoltaic. Then they will look how they can store energy to produce as much here and to have some backup here so that they can use the power which they have stored in the times where wind and solar is not available. Maybe we will go to liquefaction, so we will look that we even go for power to X and other storage solution that we have a syngas or H2, which you can use for production. And in addition, yes, we will go for cleaner fuels, LNG and others, and there will be some backup power based on that fuels, and all this has to be managed to somehow wire a good and qualified energy management system, which really is able to get all these things together in a proper way, and then you have your specific island or specific solution, which will be to somehow really the future. We have another trend which is quite interesting in the world, for instance, this one in the Caribbean sector. You have a couple of islands where they already installed diesel gensets and others, and now you bring in solar, wind, and others, so it's fuel safe. It's a question of combining existing power plants with renewables, wind, PV, and others, batteries, so that you're reducing your CO2 carbon footprint and that you calculate commercially against the fuel saving, which is combined with such a solution. So even this is interesting. So this is all daily business work, and this is just an example which is right now coming up, that we are building an LNG power plant in Gibraltar. Even this shows that people are looking for these kind of solutions where you get your supply and you bring your gas in there and look how you can act there. I want to look more specific now in the future and want to highlight a little bit something which I mentioned at the beginning. Germany is still, again, a good example because we're saying renewables is the new baseload, everything is fine. We decided to do the decommission of the last nuclear power plant by 2022. Also, the fade out of coal is politically absolutely clear, and it looks like it's going to be around 2030. And then have a look on what is the challenge. These three kinds of energy: nuclear, lignite, and the coal. They are producing together here now 52% of the kilowatt hours we are using. So it's 290 terawatt hours. So, and now we can discuss again, what does this mean if this all goes out? We can install as much as we want in wind and in power, but they will not produce the energy at that time when it is needed. So we will have not only for grid securing stability issues, and if you think about e-mobility, and if you just do the calculation, what does it mean if you're having 100,000 Teslas in the cities at Munich? It's 10,000 megawatt to 15,000 megawatt you need for 20 minutes. So let's do this on a bigger range and let's discuss about the millions of electrical cars. So there will be a lot of additional capacity and load which we need for 20 minutes, 30 minutes somewhere. For the time being, it's not a problem. The system is with a 200,000 megawatt stable enough. So for the next years, this is not going to be an issue. But let's have a view on the long term. And on the long term, there is base load which will go out. And I do not see that you can fill this gap only with renewables. Even if we are building renewables with all the storage solutions we were talking about, there's going to be still a need And not only for grid purposes, even because we will need load, but it will not be the 7,000-hour plant. It's not going to be like this. It's going to be in a more flexible way, and there will things coming up. But this is something which is quite interesting and will have an impact, and I think we are not discussing this on a long term. And in our industry, if you talk about energy and power, you need to have a 10, 15 years perspective. And based on that, something like this will happen and will have a huge impact in our system. So let's, coming to an end, to somehow, I was focusing very much on what has happened here in Europe and in Germany and the nuclear case. Apologize for all of you who are much more from the Asian, African and other areas, because in your countries, we have still 1.6 billion people without any energy. So seeing this, we still have countries where the first question is how to get the energy demand solved, and then baseload and large power combustion plants can be a solution, no question. Look at Egypt, Siemens Invest and others. So what I'm describing here was really a specific one for a lot of industrialized countries where we even going this path, but it shows a trend and it shows absolutely in which direction things will develop. So I'm not saying that there is no future for large combustion engines, but in the world, I think we will start firstly in the future to look on, can we serve energy via renewables, via PV, via wind, and then get the fossil, whoever it is, in addition to that, combine that, think in that kind of hybrid solutions. That's to me the combination. There is a lot of combination where we will have to include storage devices, batteries and others and this kind of hybrid solutions to get there. And I'm pretty sure we will have a discussion even about large combustion engines in Europe and in Germany to secure our system from the grid point and even to be sure to supply us. So this was, let's say, the main extract of what I have to present. So thank you very much, and I'm open to discuss this later on with you, even on the panel and wherever. Thank you very much for your attention.